and I'm going to make a very quick informal intro once again. This is the last meetup virtual session, one of the series. I'm Gene Gendel, the organizer of the meetup based out of New York City. My guest tonight is Robert Brees of Berlin, Germany, and he will be presenting on his personal experience and journey with large-scale Scrum adoption at one of his clients in Germany. And Robert is the certified LESS trainer. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Robert. Robert, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Gene. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity here. I'm super excited to be here and have the chance to speak at your virtual LESS meetup. I'm based in Berlin, as you said, and I also joined a couple of meetups in Berlin, and I talked about this case study at the last LESS conference, yeah, I'm extremely excited to share it once again here with you. I have a disclaimer that I would like to start with. First of all, the whole name thing. I mentioned it on the top slide. It's I call the company SIS. It's a fictional name. Unfortunately, because of the non-disclaimer things and legal topics, I'm not allowed to talk about the real company name. I guess, you know, if you do some research, you might be able to figure it out, but I just don't. I want to make sure that I don't, you know, officially make some statements that are linked directly with my name and the company.
And this is not uncommon, Robert. That's fine. We all want to protect privacy and confidentiality of clients. Many case studies and presentations omit exposing actual names, so that's fine.
Perfect. Thanks, Gene, for yeah, confirming that, adding that, and I think it's super. You know, I value more the idea of sharing the experience and the knowledge, and that's also the idea behind the case studies on the left side. And yeah, I will try now in about half an hour or so to summarize my experience. You can read more about it in detail on the left side on the case studies. And yeah, let me just begin. Another important disclaimer is if you follow through the course of the case study, which is of course in chronological order, you need to understand from the beginning that it's not how it is supposed to be, how a LESS adoption should be. It's the way how you know, we had the chance to implement it, and basically if you're familiar with the LESS rules and specifically the adoption, the rules related to the adoption, one of the LESS rules says that for product group, you need to establish the complete LESS structure at the start. This is vital for a LESS adoption. And only when you're dealing with large organization beyond the product group, bigger than 8 teams, you should do it experimentally, and you should basically grow your LESS adoption evolutionary. And basically, this is what we did on a smaller scale, on a LESS scale. And I will talk about it at the end, why this can be so like difficult or conflicted to do, and why it's not ideal to do it in that way. But just as a disclaimer, if you should do a less adoption on a small scale, please do it all at once, not as we did it here. I will start just with some words of introduction. I have 20 years of experience in software development. I'm an agile coach with a focus on outcome-oriented changes. What I mean by that is that I have developed an agile coaching approach using impact maps to make sure that the customer we create a behavior change and real outcomes in organizations. Yeah, besides the certifications you see on this slide, I guess the major certification that I got end of last year is the LESS trainer certification. And I'm working with big and small companies. There are a lot of startups in Berlin, and I have the chance to work with smaller companies as well as big ones. I founded a consulting company in 2013 called Lean Sherpas, and we provide trainings, consultation, long-term coaching. Like the Sherpas, we sometimes carry the heavy stuff, like facilitating difficult discussion, but most of the time we guide our clients how to get rid of the heavy stuff and reach high levels with less. So I think it fits pretty well also with with our mission and with less. So just a couple of words on me now. The system that I'm talking about, the platform that we implemented, it's something like an online store. I have here a picture of Amazon. It is a store for software, and it was designed to help the companies sell their own software, but also partner products on site, including all the payment and everything related to that. And the system used actually Hybris. SAP Hybris is the platform that is used as a platform to implement the store and to share the software. A couple of words on the organizational setup, and I think something that you might encounter in your organizations or organizations that you're working with. There was a clear division between the IT organization and the digital organization, the business organization. And I was hired by the IT organization, some levels below, by a manager there who was in charge of the whole store program to to implement basically this software store. And of course, the people from the business side, there were quite a huge amount of people that were involved with dealing with the teams that were actually developing the software that is sold on those platforms, and with partner softwares and so on. And regarding the teams setup, we had the usual setups of partially component teams, also single functional teams like testing or UI UX teams. We had a group of people that was called the architecture team, and people that were doing background development, backend development. Backend in our case was SAP ERP, SAP CRM, and as I mentioned, we had basically SAP Hybris developers. So this is a picture that I took from one of the slides in our presentations in the past, and I just changed, manipulated some names here and there, but it's actually a representation on how the whole organizational setup was having business with different sub teams and departments, and the technical team. We had basically three hybrid development teams, and again, then the whole that you can see on the right side, and then again some DevOps experts, the architecture team, and so on. And you have the usual program management setup, weekly status, stakeholder status reports, and the likes that you might know from waterfall implementations. And yeah, this is another picture where you only like focusing on the technical work streams with the yeah, now here I have actually 4 dev teams, including the maintenance team and interface and the backend team, people that are only doing CRM and ERP development. So that was the setup when I joined. I think it was early beginning of 2015, and they were working already in the setup for a longer period of time. I guess already almost a year. In the belief that they were doing Scrum, but still there were some people that knew that had experience with Scrum previously, and knew for sure that this was not really has actually just a few things in common with Scrum. And of course, something that you find in this kind of setup is program schedule or Gantt chart. This is just a high-level image, just to see how the whole was, everything was organized. We have the usual blueprint phase, development phase, test phase, and I've been part of one of the big launches of the platform on a conference, of companies conference, that was I believe yeah, beginning of May, and it was a very tough period. The last couple of weeks before the go live, it's you know it from the waterfall projects, where you create war rooms, and all the people fly from different areas in to the headquarters and sit together and make sure that they can manage the go live. And after that really tough experience, I was basically asked if I could come up with a plan on how to basically switch this whole setup into doing Scrum. As I was involved already with some smaller Scrum transitions, and worked even with some of the colleagues in real Scrum setup, I was pretty excited, but I haven't done that kind of change for that that kind of organization until then. So my first plan was basically to come up with a list of challenges, and I started interviewing a lot of people from the business side, from the development side, and asked them, what do you see as the biggest problems? And I came up with this list that you can see here. Things like having a lot of regression issues, founded late, and in development, bottlenecks for decisions and guidelines, and everyone basically just focusing on their piece of the software, not taking ownership of the whole platform. Of course, things like management decision with unrealistic timelines, cost, quality, and unclear priority of single features and product capabilities. And on top of that, there was mostly feedback from the business side. Then from the technical side, we had a lot of issue with infrastructure problems, availability, with having a long period of time to deploy the software. And we only had basically the go live every half a year or so. Because we worked in parallel, the teams worked in parallel on different lines of code, and merged it after a long period of time on working in parallel. So a lot of challenges that was easy for me to put this up and convince basically the higher management that there is a need to move on and to change the way we work. But I was not really comfortable or sure what's the best way to do the switch, how to integrate it, how to convince people that that it's needed, and so on. Usually, I like to do this kind of exercise in a group and have people work and discuss these questions that you see on the slide, and then come up with examples. So make it a bit interactive. I will skip this step here and talk a bit maybe just about how Craig is actually starting less adoption. So Craig Larman, first of all, he likes to do a so-called informed consent workshop. This is something that usually takes from around 1 day to 3 day, maybe even 5 days. He likes to spend the first half of the first day with the technical team, and he sits together and does mob programming for the half of day. The reason why he do is actually because he learns a lot about the organization by working with the code hands-on, and he learns about the people and the tools that are used, the code quality, and it's also a great practice to teach technical test-driven development. So that's usually a way how he starts this informed consent workshop. Then he has a half a day discussion with the senior management. He usually does a CLP or a CLE course, and he afterwards. So there is a full training for 2 or 3 days of CLP, and then it takes 1 more day to let people ask questions, yeah, to discuss the implications basically with the whole team members. And after the workshop, he walks away, lets the management team together with the developers discuss and decide if they want to start with less adoption or not, and then starts with a small group of people, around 50 people, to do a less adoption. That's actually the way how Craig Larman likes to do it, and unfortunately, I was not aware about that inside, and I had no clue, to be honest, how to introduce it in a good way. What I was sure was actually that there is a need for a change, and I knew that there are, I had some clear goals of the transition. And those I put together and presented them together with the foundings about the things that need to be changed that I showed on the previous slide. And I presented this to the high management in a meeting that where I had the chance to talk with the chief digital officer, so the highest person on the business side. And I presented this overall goals: improving the code quality, and creating ownership on the development side for the whole system, uh, optimize the system for faster delivery of customer value, and being able to adapt at a really fast and a cheap way, which is actually comes extremely close to the optimizing goal, system optimizing goal of less. So high level of adaptiveness for learning and delivering most value to the paying customers. Yeah. Of course, like the management agreed to that and said, yeah, that's perfect. I then had the chance to present the prerequisites from my side. I said, in order to be successful, we first of all have to work much more closer together, business and development. It's not, a change that we have to do on the development side. It's not a different approach of working and developing software. It's something that we have to do together, business and development. And we have to have a workshop where we talk about our own working model and to define the way we work from now on. In addition to that, we need self-managing, cross-functional, co-located teams, and we need to educate everyone. We need to spend time to educate everyone in Scrum and create a common definition of done. And then we need one product backlog if we want to optimize for the whole system, for the whole product, and not have local optimizations. Again, on the feedback was positive. The CDO said, "Yeah, perfect. So sounds good. What's your plan? Like, how do you want to do it?" And of course, the natural thing that you then come up and propose, and as expected, is that you come up with some kind of transition plan, which is, of course, as short as possible. In our case, it was like a month from 1st of May to 1st of June for setting up, the teams, the working agreements, and all of that. In the meantime, you take care of many other things that are still pending, and then 1 month later, you're doing the switch, which was something that matched, of course, the expectation of the higher management, but was absolutely unrealistic. So we couldn't actually do much things in that short period of time. The main thing that we were able to do is really had a workshop with business and development, and really talk about how we want to continue working, set up some working agreements, and we also had some educations on Scrum with the different teams and development with the development teams. But I think the main issue that we have, or the things that we couldn't change, was really creating co-located teams. So we did set up feature teams and try to create teams with different skills, backend development skills, DevOps skills. We had UX, UI in every team, and of course the Hybris development skills and testing. But we didn't have all the teams in the same location, or at least one location, one team in one location. They all were over multiple locations. And we actually, at the beginning, the idea was to put the people together that know each other best, to work with each other, which created even more dispersed teams. And after some times, we changed a bit and moved. Like we changed the teams to make sure that we had as less locations as possible. So what did we do in this kickoff workshop? Again, it was a 2-day workshop focusing on how to teach Scrum. We like on the focus was on teaching Scrum, and we had this workshop together with business representatives and development representatives. Unfortunately, not everyone, at least on the development side, there was everyone who was basically taught in Scrum, but not everyone on the business side attended, and especially the senior management. Not everyone from the senior management was there. And I guess that's something that was my key learnings from the workshop from the kickoff, to make sure that you include all senior management stakeholders in such kind of workshop, in the education of Scrum and less. And the second thing is really not only to focus on the mechanics of less or Scrum, but to focus on why. Help participants to understand the organizational design implications that less brings. This is a key learning for me, because most of the time really discussed how we should work, and how things, what Scrum says or less says on doing things. But ideally, and this is something that we try to do in CLP courses, is basically to help people come to their own understanding why it's much better, or you should have only one product backlog, only one product owner, instead of multiple product backlogs or team product owners. All right, so Gene, are there any questions that I should be aware of now, or should I?
Thanks for asking, Rob. So we are actually almost, so we're like 30 minutes into the discussion, 35 minutes into the discussion. I do have one question submitted in the chat room, and also somehow some folks decided to reach out to me through the meetup directly. So I have a few questions already compiled. Do you want to take them now, or
Cool.
do you? Yep. You want to do it now?
Yeah, we can. I guess, yeah, we can do some now, and if there is, well, if there are something that I will explain later, I will mention that.
I think some of them, at least a few of them came before you covered it. At least you mentioned this in passing, but let me play them back to you. One is kind of binary. Well, actually not binary. It's a simple one. How many different time zones were represented in this effort? In other words, in how many time zones were the teams? Was it maybe you want to mention something about distributed versus multi-site, if there was an instance of that in your case? I'll start with that one.
Yeah. So basically, we had dispersed teams, which means that they were team members on different locations in one team, but and our goal was to have multi-site teams, as you mentioned, Gene. So basically, having at least a full team at one location, and then maybe multiple location. We only managed, I guess, after two or even 2.5 years, when I left the team, there was still no full team working in one location. But I know that basically, like, I left after 1.5 years around, and I think after 2.5 years, they finally managed to have one location where all team members were sitting at one location. So it was a really long transition to that. And in terms of time zones, we had not such a big discrepancy there. There were some people in the US, but like the most people from the development teams and yeah, business people that we had part of this teams were in Europe, not more than 1 or 2 time zones away.
Understood. Okay, I think that answers, that covers it. You want to take another one now?
Yeah.
The other one, there was another question that was submitted about how did you manage, how did you align the less product teamwork with the, and of course there was an assumption in the question too. How did you align this work with the bigger and greater organizational strategy, portfolio management, program management? Was there, I guess there was an assumption in the question that there was a need for that. So you may either say, yes, there was, and address it, or say you've done away with having this, overarching, bigger, more challenging structure. Was there portfolio management involved of any sort?
Well, a lot of things were treated as portfolio management. That's because it was quite away from development, from the product, and again, there was a huge organizational on the business side that I said, the digital teams that were were involved in everything that also the IT was covering. But I guess once we basically created this one common product backlog, and I will talk about this shortly, then this got more less as a discussion, and we managed to represent basically portfolio topics as part of the product backlog. And I think that's something that we also recommend in less, if at all possible, if you don't have too many products that are not fitting together, or where it becomes too complicated. By putting everything in one product backlog, you get rid of this local optimization, and you use Scrum basically for having a gate process and discuss regularly, review regularly where you are, what you want to proceed on doing, and so on. Yeah, so if you look at I think it's in the first book of Craig and Buzz about portfolio management. This is what they basically recommend to get rid of it if possible, and move to one product backlog and Scrum or less.
I think it made sense. Thanks. I think it clarifies, at least to me, it becomes clear. So it isn't uncommon to see many conventional portfolios to be more of a way to staple a bunch of ad hoc, not customer-centric initiatives that are usually in line with sphere of control and domain of control of organizational hierarchy. So it's a portfolio structure is a reflection of a hierarchy of the organization as opposed to true
Correct.
Product portfolio. So in which case, if you want to do a product-centric, customer-centric work, you have to dismantle those. It's probably challenging too when you up against the organizational structure that is resistant to giving up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. There was one more question maybe you want to take now quickly. Although you mentioned this just before we went into Q&A. The question was, did each team have its own product owner? And I think you did mention this, that there was one product. I think you mentioned something about the backlog being shared by multiple teams. I'm not sure if you're going to cover and stress
Yes.
explicitly. Yeah, go ahead.
That's something that is I'm just going through discuss right now.
Okay.
So let me give some insight on that. It's just gonna come up. Before that though, let's see to this transition. I mentioned it before. We moved from this kind of single functional and single component teams to cross-functional and cross-component teams with specific locations. Then like we have a team in Poland, we have a team in Berlin, but again, even at the time when I left, there were some people that were not sitting. We just called it Team Berlin because majority of people were sitting in that location. Now let's come to the product owner. So for me, it was pretty clear, especially being aware about large-scale Scrum, that the goal is to have one product owner. But I knew that this is something that we were not able to introduce right away, and that's what I meant at the beginning of ideally really look for setting the whole structure in front from the beginning and not trying to gradually get to there as we did. And again, I will talk at the end on why that can happen, why this is a bad idea. But what we did is basically we started with actually not one product owner or fake product owner per team, but actually two. And I don't know how it is in your organization, but especially if you have this difference between development organization and business organization, then you have on the development side the former project managers, and they at the point where you changed to agile and do agile adoptions and so on, those people are asked to think about, there are no project management anymore, so they are asked to decide what they want to become, a scrum master or a product owner. And we know from experience a lot of scrum masters that were previously project manager have a really tough time to get their mind around the different mindset, and usually either pretty bad, or they leave, or they manage really to do this change. And we had actually one person who did this change and was successful, and all the others actually have left the organization. So much to the Scrum Master. The other project managers changed to this kind of product owner role. But of course, this is like a fake product owner, which at the end is a business analyst who passes requirements, is used to discuss things with the business department, and even like write stories or product backlog items, and then and be some kind of middleman. We actually then had to do a lot of coaching and discussions, and with time this fake product owners that were established at the beginning moved into really becoming business analysts, part of the teams, who then took responsibility of team members. But at the start, we started with actually one product owner per team. Actually, one technical product owner, it was called, because it was someone from the development team. And then, in addition to that, we even had a second product owner, which was per team, which came from the business side, and that was a project manager on the business side, who was supposed to make sure that some kind of requirements or area of requirements were then implemented in a specific time, what happened in the past. And even here we had, of course, then a longer transition of time to make them understand that what we need is basically to get rid of local optimization and having single teams do part of a product which then doesn't optimize for doing the most important and most valuable items for the product. So we only get this if we create one product backlog and one product owner who prioritize the list. And we actually manage with time. So at the beginning, I organized regularly before every refinement meeting and every planning meeting, a meeting with all these fake product owners. And we use the user story mapping, and we discussed basically all this kind of the product backlog items that are part of the shared product backlog, even though at the beginning it was represented in it was created by different people in different backlogs. I've urged them to have a common discussion at regular times, and it was actually at least twice a sprint, once before the refinement, once before planning, to get the shared picture of what are we going to do. And that was pretty vital to make them understand, okay, we might have a focus on single backlogs of teams, but at the most important thing for us is what can we get done in one sprint and two sprints of all the items. And people realized, and it was quite frustrated then for some of these fake product owners, that they have refined with a team for a week or sprint items that didn't get implemented in the next sprint because they were not so important. And during the whole joint discussion, a new priority was created, and those items that was refined by the one team didn't get were not so important that they would end up high in the product backlog. And it created a lot of very frustrating discussions and meetings. But on the other side, it led to the fact that we had a couple of escalation, always going back to the highest management on the CDO on the business side. And at the end, he established one person who was then in charge of giving the decision. And once this was established, this person not only did it like at the beginning, you know, made the decisions in those meetings, and later those meetings weren't needed anymore. This person was the one product backlog, the one product backlog who was then in charge of the product backlog. So this is how, for us, this is like the story how it evolved from having team team product backlogs and team output owners, how Michael James likes to call them, in, you know, because they're not really product owners, and to this to our, you know, evolution of having then at the end just one product backlog and one product owner. And this picture also represents again that if you just put you know, the items of that are refined but the different teams in one product backlog, you don't necessarily get one product backlog. You only have one if it is basically if you can prioritize it, and you change the priority really on the um, most important customer values. Um, yeah, so that was the story about the product owner and product backlog. Now I have, I think, just a couple more slides. One about the technical excellence, and that's something super important from my point of view. I think that was one of the main things why we at the end had a lot of success with the adoption. We had a couple of people that had experience in DevOps practices, who did continuous delivery, even, you know, in 2013, 2011 already in that organization. And we integrated those people in our teams, and they set up a continuous integration yeah, way of working. So not only the continuous integration system, but basically the mindset of integrating continuously, doing automated tests and so on. And we managed by that to really improve the code quality. We managed to create a mindset of people owning the whole software. And I remember, like, you know, we used Slack for communication, and we integrated the build system with Slack. And whenever the build was failing, people were, you know, stepping up and saying, "Look, I'm gonna look into seeing why this." Why we have a red build, um, and was not necessarily always like the same people or you know, a specific team. So that was really a huge improvement, and over time we had a comprehensive automated test suite, which allows us to move, like, to really gain speed in delivering new software. And at the end, we could, when I left, we could go live basically after every sprint, which was unthinkable 1.5 years before. I guess another thing was to establish communities. We had, you know, the usual, like, communities like testing communities, Scrum Master communities, and design architecture, backend, and we had like this you know, this business analyst um, community that yeah, became later on just a business analyst community. Yeah, this is a picture of the working model. Again, you will, yeah, can also see it in the last case study. And at the end, I would just try to summarize yeah, just the conclusions, the things that I learned from it, and from my perspective, what really worked well was to create. You know, we used the less framework rules, principles, and guides for our, for our transformation. And to be honest, I never spoke about less during the time of the adoption, because really I was trying to create ownership. I was not trying to sell them some kind of framework, but I was basically most of the time just talking about Scrum. And we what really worked well is, of course, when we realized we had one product backlog, one product owner, and using all the last events to have the feeling that we really do Scrum and optimize by adaptability and customer value. We, as I mentioned before, this stop and fix was something that was extremely helpful for us to deliver a better product. Whenever the build was read, we take care of that and then moved on. Was important for us to remove hierarchies and structural barriers and not stick to specific roles. And it took some times, but I think, yeah, we got there in the end. And it was tough for us to abandon the special group of people. We still kept, and you can read it in the case study, like sometimes the name, because of the the pricing, the rules of payment. Many people were externals, and of course, like a senior person had a different rate than a non-senior. But no one was acting anymore to their specific title or so on, which was super important for us. And I think that the coaching was extremely important. What did we learn? So there, first of all, and I mentioned it at the beginning, there are definitely better ways to adopt less that have a better chance to succeed. If you start with education at the beginning on the why, if you talk about the organizational design structures that lead to a non-optimal implementation, and if you get rid of those and put an organization design in place from the beginning, like one product backlog, one product owner, you have a much higher chance to succeed. And if you get strong alignment and agreement from the executive managers, so if you involve them from the beginning and educate them, and then they can make this transparent from the beginning, and use volunteering as much as possible, you have a much higher chance to succeed. So the thing is that with if you do it this approach, the chances are also quite high that you might be familiar with the Larman law of organizational behaviors, and which says that basically you know if the organization is designed to maintain the status quo, and you might end up basically doing the same things as before, and just call it differently in order just to keep the status quo. And that's a huge risk that you have when you try to change the things slowly, and not educate everyone from the beginning, and put an organizational design in place from the start. Yeah, so I guess that was my summary and my learnings. You can find much more about it if you read the full case study. And yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Robert. Yes, indeed. I think let's open up the channel for questions. I have a few more that came through. And but let's see, maybe people want to ask them live. And thank you very much for budgeting for the Q&A part. By the way, very strongly resonates what you said. Less does not sell. You can either get it for free or not, but to get it for free, you need to deserve it. Right?
Yeah.
Hard to sell, but shouldn't sell it. Anyway, does anyone have any questions? Anyone who's on the call at the moment? You can unmute yourself if you would like to speak.
Hello, this is David Nielsen. Can you hear me?
Hi, David.
Okay, I have kind of a technical question, I guess, about how to flow the meetings. My question is, first, do you use multi-team product backlog refinement as part of the LESS training? They teach you about that. And then do you do story mapping before or during that workshop? Because the way that MTPBR is structured, it doesn't really seem to lend itself to story mapping. Story mapping is a little bit less about rotating cohorts of teams than around requirements. It seems to be more of a fluid exploratory event. Can you comment on how you kind of piece all that together? Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess we did occasionally did some multi-team product backlog refinement, but not that often as I would love to do, to be honest. That was because also it was quite difficult because of the many location and the dispersed teams. What we did is we had user story mapping done like prior to the refinement, when we really talked very high level on the product backlog items, and tried to have a visualization, which we then took into the backlog refinements, and then went a level deeper, basically into the refinements. But yeah, I guess usually you could you can do an overall backlog refinement at the beginning of the refinement, and then go into multi-team product backlog refinements. Some are just skipping the overall product backlog refinement, which is fine. But I guess, in my personal opinion, you could use something like user story mapping in this kind of overall backlog refinement part, if you do it, just to make sure you give a high level picture. And if you want, you can use it as a kind of agile roadmap. A way of visualizing where you want to go, but not really having this kind of waterfall approach. Alternatively, I also experimented with impact map instead of story maps, which also works quite well, and also used it as an introduction into the refinement, especially in the overall backlog refinement part.
Thank you, Robert. Did that answer the question, David?
Yes, it did. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else who may have a question or comment for Robert?
Hi, this is Ellen. Robert.
Yeah.
Hey, Gene.
Let's
Thank
see.
you first of all for doing this. Extremely informative. I appreciate it. My quick question is, did you experiment at all with self-organizing teams?
You mean, well, I mean self-organizing or self-designing teams? Because I mean,
designing, where they would form, a product person would.
Yeah. Okay, okay, I see. Because I mean, for me, every Scrum team is a self-organizing team who actually organize themselves without having a manager and so on. But yeah, self-designing is something that I've done, and I was involved actually after this case study. I also worked for BMW in Munich on one of the big, less huge adoptions. And I was involved there with self-designing team workshops. And I would have loved to do it also here, but to be honest, I was not aware about that by the time in 2015. But I think, yeah, if you have the chance, I urge you to convince management that it's great to let the team self-design and put them together based on a couple of rules that you set up in the beginning of the self-design workshop.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question, Alan.
Thanks.
Let's see you here again. Folks, anyone else with questions? I got two in the queue, but going once, going twice. Well, let me pose one, and maybe you can think of another question, someone. So I think, Robert, you mentioned this again. The question came after you mentioned this. The reference was to horizontal organizational structures that were in a supportive function. You obviously mentioned about communities, Scrum Master community. I think there was the engineering developers or testers community. Maybe you want to go back to that slide. The question was about was there any managerial factor involved there, like first line manager, second line manager? Also, was there any typical organizational relationship that we see, like performance management in those communities? Like what kind of relationship did people have there? What was the flavor of that?
Well, I have to be honest. I think we were quite lucky that we didn't have this kind of real managers in the communities. Again, I think it was related to the fact that most of the people involved, and I didn't mention it at the beginning, but that was actually an important fact also why we had so many people dispersed, was that there were a lot of most of people were externals. There were just very few internal people, and the managers were just very few managers on the technical side. There were, I guess, just 2 managers involved, and on the business sides, also the hierarchy was actually pretty flat. I think there was one area, but one level or 2 levels of hierarchy there, but they were definitely not involved in the communities, especially from the business side. And on the technical side, also there was no real management involved.
It sounds like your communities were free of managerial control. These were truly by volunteering and by,
correct.
You come for functional and domain knowledge sharing and
correct. And so that was pretty good. And there were some people questioning the need of that, but once they experienced a couple of community sessions, we grew basically this need of
I'm suspecting this question, and I'm not sure that obviously it's not in the question, but I'm throwing my hypotheses. Some people hear about terms like a chapter or a chapter of chapters or guild. These, there's some graphic ad there, especially lately on LinkedIn. You see posts, and so maybe people are coming from that angle, because those are also horizontal structures. But obviously, unless community means something very specific. Regarding to the management aspect, I think just a question that I would like to add also came from, I think from David. Do all Scrum teams report to the head of product? That would be the last thing, or something like that. So what was in your case, how did these folks roll up? Individual, developers, individual team members, who did they report into?
There was still basically we still had this kind of difference between some technical skilled people who were reporting to the head of IT, or the manager in the IT department, and then there was the business people that were reporting to, at the end, the CDO, and maybe one manager below. But luckily there was no we didn't have any kind of personal goals. We even didn't have kind of OKRs or team goals or something like that.
Did you or did you not have those?
No.
And and other.
No, we didn't have. Of course, there was kind of pressure, to be able to deliver. To deliver software, and I think on the business sides there were some kind of goals from the CDO to the sub managers, which created conflicts in this product backlog prioritization, and that's something I guess that they were struggling with. But on the IT side, for example, none of the developers had kind of some kind of personal goals or even team goals. It was just on the business side, from my perspective, that some people were responsible of parts of the platform, delivering new products within the platform, which then again created this kind of conflict that they were looking for local optimization. And that played against the whole system optimization and the optimizing for one product backlog. And we had to have couple of difficult discussions, and I don't think it changed, but that was still something that left open as one of the huge conflict potentials.
You know what? On the note of OKRs, and for those that may not know what this is, it's the fancy abbreviation for the objectives and key results. There was just a comment in the chat from Shrikath from, I think he's from
Toronto.
I'm sorry.
Toronto.
I was going to say Ottawa. Yes, Toronto indeed. And he says OKR, the product backlog is the OKR, so that there is no OKR, so there is no OKR required unless, which is an actual very strong resonates with me. I've seen so many teams being almost intoxicated with the notion of OKRs and spending hours and days and weeks defining the OKRs. And
it's very simple, Gene. The project backlog is your goal and objective, so you cannot have two goals. Essentially, you can't have your own personal goal and team goal. You are aligning to the product, so that's your only goal, and the backlog is your only goal. Therefore,
that's precisely what I would. That you said it better. So indeed, and I was always surprised why would someone spend so much time defining what is no value add. If you have a good backlog, if you work towards your customer centric needs, then your backlog is your OKR, and every backlog item is the part of that OKR. So why waste time writing those up and spend so much time and energy anyway? Right. There was one comment actually it's a question coming from David. I want to be conscious of your time too, Robert. I think it's coming up at a pretty late hour for you, and let me know if you can take one more before we wrap it.
Yeah, let's do one more and then
Okay.
we wrap it there.
So I'm going to take this from David. How did you handle funding a single backlog with different funding sources and date commitments? Some companies deal with BAU, business as usual, and CapEx funding sources. David, you may want to decide for CapEx. I'm not sure what that is. If a team is assigned to CapEx work, maybe it's a capital X, how can they expect to have BAU on the same product? I think, oh, capital expense. Okay, so how do you toggle between the two? How do you budget between business as usual work and CapEx funding coming from CapEx?
Well, in our case, we really had one product, and even though we had, you know, fundings coming from like whatever customers who wanted to, you know, sell products on the platform, or you know, the fundings came from different locations, and as I mentioned, we even had, you know, the CDO had maybe trying to make different people, managers responsible for you know, improving the platform in that direction with some funding and so on. I mean, from my side, I said, look, this is all local optimization, and we have to have this conversation together. We have to have you know, one product backlog, and discuss that we cannot do all the things at the same time. So you have to prioritize, and you decide what is more important to do, what should we refine, and then in planning what should be prioritized. And this is the list of items in that order that we will show the development teams, and they will pick from top to bottom. And we make sure that, you know, they don't pick something from the bottom that that they might know better if there are some more important things on top. And this is how basically we deal with that. I've really forced them into using one product backlog, even though it was maybe refined by different people and different teams that were more aware about something. But putting this everything in one backlog, and even, you know, and prioritizing things like business as usual maintenance and so on, together with stuff that gets additional funding in one product backlog. This is how we basically get rid of local optimization. It was not easy, I'm not saying that. I mean, we often had kind of escalations back to the chief digital officer, but again, then we came up to the list that our time is limited, and we only focus not on what we're gonna deliver the next half a year, but basically with the focus of the next sprint and the sprint after and so on. And yeah, this is how we worked, I guess. I hope it answers somehow the question.
Hopefully, David will now let us know if I think he says thank you very much. So I think it answers his question. So okay, we are on the half. We're at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, and it's really late in Germany. So I'm going to ask everyone to thank you either virtually or, you know, just, you know, applaud silently. I personally very much appreciate your ability and willingness to participate in the event. I think it was very informative. It's a great way to put your personal touch, your words onto your otherwise very informative case study, right? So it's public and it's out there, people can read it. Thank you once again, everyone. This was from Robert Brees of Germany, Berlin. He might be visiting New York City sometime later this year, and you can always look him up on LinkedIn, and maybe we'll have him back again to discuss something more specific in his last case study, maybe something very tailored. And let's leave it at that. Everyone, thank you very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I'm going to stop recording now. Hopefully I know how to do it. And it should be available hopefully soon. I'm going to download it from the cloud and make it available to public.
Thanks a lot, Gene. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, as Gene said, reach out to me if you have further questions, if you read the case study and you want to learn more, or no problem, shoot me an email. You can find me also on Twitter.
Do I have your permission to add the link to your case study to the distribution I usually
Totally.
have to
Yeah.
people? Okay.
Totally.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gene.
Excellent. Everyone have a great night and safe travels if you're en route to home.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.